Let me say we get started. Um, yeah, thumbs up. Everyone's good to go. Wonderful. Okay, well, like we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathering virtually on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. Hi, everyone. My name is Gino DiDomenico, and I am the managing partner at Tacofino, and I am delighted to welcome you to the first shift change of 2021. Shift change is committed to active support, positive and sustainable change by creating an avenue for dialogue on opportunities that exist in an effort to inspire people to take action and make change. This will be our third session in a series of four where we're focusing on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. What happens after these four? Well, we're currently finalizing the details on what our next series is going to look like, so stay tuned for that. Today, I am very excited because we have an amazing individual, Lisa Beecroft, who owns not only multiple businesses, but she's the co-chair of the President's Group, which is a group that champions inclusive employment practices here in BC. She's an advocate for local businesses, and she has earned herself multiple recognitions and awards for her inclusive practices, and I am very much looking forward to listening to today's session. As a thank you for her time, Tacofino will be donating $1,250 to the Pacific Autism Family Network. And you can donate to their efforts and find out more about the amazing work that they do by visiting our webpage at shiftchangenow.com, where we host a list of our partners, or you can go directly to pacificautismfamily.com. Today's format will be a Q&A hosted and moderated by our amazing Taylor Shabadiak, our head of people and engagement and an all-around great guy. We will be taking your questions at the end of the hour, so we do encourage you to ask any questions that you may have for Lisa while we have her here. And before I hand it over to Taylor, let me thank everyone one more time for taking the time to be here. On behalf of Tacofino and Shift Change, welcome.
Thanks, Gino. Yeah, I'm super stoked. I'm really excited. Today we're going to try a new format. We're going to do a Q&A. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here with the amazing Lisa Beecroft, who Gino mentioned does incredible things for the community and the industry itself, and is co-owner of Gabi and Jules and Handmade pies and baked goodness, as well as Caffe Divano. And today, you know, we're going to be going over some questions and things like that. So if anyone that's in the audience today has any questions, you know, you have a couple options. You can pop that into the chat. You can put it in the Q&A, or you can click the raise your hand button. And just note that if you do click raise your hand, I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to ask you to share. So then, if you prefer to you know, ask your questions verbally, that's your best option. But if you don't, you have two other options as well. And like Gino said, on shiftchangenow.com, you're going to have some information so you can learn more about Lisa and maybe even connect with Lisa if you do have any questions. Lisa, thanks so much for being here. You know, I can't say enough that you're inspiration for me as an individual. You and I have worked on some things in the past, and I've always been inspired by what you say. And I kind of speak for everyone that I'm really excited to learn from you today and ask you some questions as well.
That's very kind, and I'm so happy to be here to chat with you. I always enjoy our chats, and I'm looking forward to sharing our story. And this is such an important topic and something that I'm incredibly passionate about. So hopefully I'm able to inspire others to undergo this journey that we've gone on. And yeah, I was just looking forward to chatting with you.
Cool. And if it's cool with you, I'm going to jump into it. And
Cool.
Okay, so the first question I have is a really tough one. It's not, but it's maybe you can tell us all here a little bit about yourself.
For sure. So I am the co-owner of Gabi and Jules and Caffe Divano with my husband Patrick. And Patrick started Caffe Divano over 20 years ago in Coquitlam, and I've been working with him for about 17 years now. We went from the Coquitlam location and we opened a location in Port Moody about 12 years ago, and then we opened our Burnaby location 8 years ago. And it's very easy for me to remember when we opened those locations because we opened Port Moody 6 months after I had our first child, Juliana, and we opened Burnaby 2 weeks after we had Gabriela. So we're not great on our planning. And Gabi and Jules came out of, with the cafes, we always bake from scratch. And we were baking for Burnaby, Coquitlam, our location. And at the time, like still really struggling with that cafe, just given how expensive the space was. And so we were looking for opportunities to build revenue. And we actually, funnily enough, had a performance evaluations with bakers. And with one of the bakers said, well, what can we do to make you enjoy your job more? And she said, well, let me make pie. And we're like, okay, well, look at that. And so that idea kind of sparked a conversation. We were like, pie, like it was one of those things that you couldn't get good pie out in our area. And so we took steps, and it was an interesting endeavor for us because Gabi and Jules was different from building out the cafes, which is like a large capital investment in the space for the cafes. Whereas with Gabi and Jules, we didn't have to make that investment because we already had that space and we were going to sell at the farmers market. So we really kind of gave a lot of thought into our branding and kind of organically got to a place where we decided to name it after our daughters, and that's where Gabi and Jules came from. And so we started selling the pies at the local farmers market, which is such an awesome experience, and it just really caught on. And we had an opportunity to build a bricks and mortar bakery in our favorite community, and so we were able to do that. And then in that process, with another interaction with a longtime customer in Port Moody, he works for SAP Canada, and he was chatting to me about their Autism at Work program, which is a really inspiring program that SAP, which is a very large company, has an ambitious goal of having 10% of their workforce be individuals on the autism spectrum. And it just kind of like, it was a light bulb moment for me where I was like, that's phenomenal. Like, why can't we do that? And that was just when we were in the process of building the bakery. And so we decided that was what we would do when we opened the bakery, is that we would make it inclusive of individuals on the spectrum. And obviously that was further motivated by the fact that my daughter Juliana is on the spectrum, and we had seen what a isolating diagnosis that was for her even at a very young age, and we wanted to ensure that she had a place when she got older. And so that kind of was the first steps in our journey.
Well, that's awesome. So just kind of rewinding to the opening, it sounds like a nice, calm opening.
No, that's a whole other story as far as building out a bakery and dealing with that. But it was one of our first learnings, though, too, I would say, on this journey of inclusion, because we were talking quite a bit about how we wanted to make this an inclusive space. And early on, we saw, like, I had so many moms coming to me and expecting that I was going to be able to hire all their kids, and it was the first kind of like heartbreaking moment of like that, like, it's still like a business, and so that wasn't going to be possible. And so it was one of the first things that we kind of had to learn as far as like really talking about the business side of it. And it wasn't an unlimited number of positions that we had available.
Well, that's great. And it's, I'm really excited to kind of dig into that. And I took a seminar on learning about employing individuals on the autism spectrum. And what really stood out to me is they released a statistic about the average income of someone that is on the spectrum. And they said $2,500 per year. And in my mind, I was like, 25,000? And they're like, no, $2,500 per year.
I haven't heard that statistic before.
Sorry, what'd you say?
I haven't heard that statistic before. I'm not overly shocked by it based on what I've seen as far as, it's an interesting topic with autism for myself, actually, like being like a mother of a child and going through the journey with her as far as seeing all the gaps in the system. I mean, she's going to be 13 this year, and it's very, very frustrating the way the system is set up. But then it's like also employing adults and seeing the gaps that exist at that point is also very eye-opening. And there's so much work that needs to be done to improve the outcomes and make our society more inclusive and just create more opportunities for individuals. I mean, I can't remember the stat, but I was like talking to people from Pacific Autism Family Network, and it's like 1 in 46 or 1 in 50 kids now that are getting diagnosed with autism.
Yeah, and I was talking about this in a podcast too, and it would, like, I guess it relates. I got 2 questions for you, and one is you may not have the answer for, but it's something that came up that I didn't have an answer readily on hand. Is with that stat, is it because people are more aware of autism, or?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. People always say that it's like, are more kids getting diagnosed, whereas in the past they wouldn't have been diagnosed with it. I mean, I'm sure that's part of it. However, just the rate in which it's increasing is quite startling. Like, I mean, it's like, because when Juliana, like, when we first started Gabi and Jules, we went to a fundraiser from Medicare for Autism Now, which is another great organization. The founder, her son actually is our first employee that was on the spectrum, and he started building boxes for us back when we were still at Divano. And she started this charity that is really advocating for autism treatments to be covered under Medicare. And their argument, which I think is a really sound one, is that, if your kid is diagnosed with diabetes, you're going to get the treatment that you need to ensure that your child is healthy. And that's not the case with autism. And it's very frustrating that there's so much limitations on that. Anyway, at that time, it was 1 in 64 kids. And so we're talking in a span of 5 years, the rate at which this diagnosis is increasing is exponential.
And I guess the next question I have for you is, for people that are attending here that may have limited knowledge about what having autism spectrum disorder entails. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I think that for me, the best way to kind of answer that question is the spectrum is the best way, I think, is kind of, because it does illustrate it. And I think that when I look at it from an employer perspective, that's what we've seen. It's like, I can't define what that means because it means something different for each individual, right? And so, and even for ourselves with Juliana, how that diagnosis kind of manifests itself is very different from everyone else, right? There's certain similarities that we will see, and it's like, it's interesting with the different folks that we've had working for us. I'll see like certain things, and I'm like, this is very, very similar to Juliana. But I mean, it's certainly, certain things around consistency and having predictability is a big one, and that's something that we definitely look at accommodating in the space, as far as recognizing that is important in calming anxiety and things like that, is knowing that this is the routine. For Juliana, like, for her, it's routine. Like, she thrives in a black and white sort of situation. So, and that's, I would say that the black and white piece is probably a consistent theme that I've seen for certainly from the individuals that I've met and worked with. It's a big one that helps to improve their the outcomes of their employment and their experience here.
That's great. And yeah, I'm going to ask you some questions to dig in that a little bit more too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of benefit. Recognizing that each individual within your team, has a different lived experience or background that contributes to, in a really positive way. So I'm really excited to kind of dig in that more, because I remember you telling me a story about the individual that was boxing and stuff like that. So I'm super excited to get in there.
Yeah.
I guess to kind of start on that is, you did mention it, that, you had a couple different areas of inspiration as it related to, building this into your business model. And I know at one time you had about 30% of your workplace actually consisted of individuals on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So pre-COVID, we were at like about 30% of the team members here were on the spectrum.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this before too, but as it related to the pandemic, it's actually made,
yeah, it's been kind of one of the hardest things. Like, I mean, so for COVID is a whole other, you can have a whole other conversation about what's happened through COVID and what we've learned through that. But I mean, for us, we went from 71 to 1 employee. in one day, which was a pretty devastating day for us. We had to shut down the cafes for a month, and we really weren't sure what was going to happen here at the bakery. We were luckily able to pivot pretty quickly here and go online and delivery and grocery, and that really helped us to quickly build back our team. But unfortunately, with the way that our business shifted, not all of the positions that we had prior to COVID exist now. We had to make some, really tough choices around, wanting to maintain the inclusivity, which is so hard, so much built into what we do here, but recognizing some of the challenges that do come along with being inclusive. And part of that is the accommodating and working with the anxiety that a lot of the folks had. And so what I was seeing from my team early on is that they were struggling just to manage their own anxiety and their own stress that came with the pandemic, understandably so. And I was really sensitive to not putting more on their plate than what was realistic. And so we took it kind of step by step as far as bringing back some of the folks on the team, and then just kind of looking at how we were going to move forward with the inclusivity. And we're just now taking some steps in the new year. Christmas and from Thanksgiving to Christmas, it's insanity in the bakery. So it was like, this is not the time. But now that we're in January, we're now bringing on like a new baker's assistant, and we're going to start to rebuild and hopefully get back to where we were, because it was that's definitely our goal.
Yeah, that must be really anxiety driven, especially for an individual that, their preference and how they succeed is based on that,
Yeah, I mean, we have one young man who he has been with us. He'd been with us almost from the very beginning, and he has fairly high needs, and he would come with a support worker every day, and his anxiety and his need for consistency was tremendous, and he had a bit of an aggression issue. And so I was talking to the manager of the home where he lives, and there's just no way that he's ready to come back. Like, he just can't, and which, I mean, I just can't imagine, just for everybody involved in that, for the individual themselves, as far as just the unknown and just the lack of routine of being able to do all the activities that were built into their day, and that's all taken away in an instant without being able to really fully understand what's going on is a lot. So it's again, different circumstances with different people, but just so with some of the folks that have come back, we've just been really step by step. No, you're not, they might have been working 25 hours a week, and right now they're working more 5 to 6 hours a week, because that's more what they can manage.
Right. Well, this is to a better 2021. I think for all of us, we got through 2020. 2021 has been a bit of a difficult start, but there's a lot of great stuff in the news too. And yeah, I'm really excited to hear that you're kind of scaling up again.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think there's some great opportunities there to do that, and so we're committed to it, and I'm hopeful that it will happen.
So I guess as it relates to the first question I'm going to ask you, and I'm kind of deviating away from our set question, the questions I had planned to ask you.
All good.
Just to kind of talk about, just to frame it for people here, is you investing that time in building that inclusive environment, and kind of adapting your business model to that. What things did you see as a benefit that maybe you expected or didn't necessarily expect?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give a bit of context, because I think it's important to kind of say it's been such a process. So when we opened up, as I said, we made this intention that we were going to do this. We brought people on board, but my role at the time was different. I was managing the business, and about 3.5 years ago, things shifted, and I had to quickly take over the operations of the bakery. So I opened a pie shop without knowing how to make pie. And I quickly had to learn how to make pastry and figure that out, and kind of jump into a role that was not one that I was necessarily comfortable with, but had to do it. As you do when you're an entrepreneur, you kind of just do what you got to do. And so in that process, my eyes were open to what was actually happening. And what I saw is that the previous manager didn't necessarily fully buy into what we were doing. And so it ended up being a bit more of a tokenism sort of situation. Like we had these folks that were working on the team, but they weren't included, they weren't part of the team. Like, and I saw that very quickly. And again, like having a personally vested interest in it, but also just a different level of kind of understanding of it. I was like seeing where we had gone astray. And so I very quickly had to kind of shift our direction. And a lot of it was going backwards and saying, you know what, we've gotten off course. We need to refocus these individuals and ensure that our expectations of everyone are the same. Like we don't lower our expectations for the folks with diverse abilities. It's the same expectation. We might adapt how we get there. We might provide additional supports in terms of job coaches and stuff, but those expectations are the same because it's not a job, like it's not a charity. We're not, it is very much like this, we need this task done and we need it done well. And so, you know, I have a few different anecdotes around that, like one of which is like our most amusing, we had a dishwasher who's been with us for a while and didn't really say much. He was kind of, you know, just did his thing. And I was like noticing like his performance is really falling down. And I talked to him, I was like, you know, like we've got to really working hard and work here. And just like, Lisa, do you know that like people have died in Japan from working too hard? I was like, okay. Like, are you insinuating that I'm making you work too hard? They had to really kind of digest what we were dealing with. So I talked to, you know, the person who had placed us with him and understood that he had a real fascination with Japanese culture. This was like a real thing for him. Kind of connected with his mom. And we had a conversation, like his mom was like a single mom who immigrated here with 3 kids and one with special needs. Like, I'm like, I guarantee this woman is a hardworking woman. Like, and so we kind of had these conversations and worked through it. And like today, not only is he like we call him like the ninja because he's like his dishwashing skills are insane. But he's also become part of the team. Like he asks you how you are. Like he would never have done that before. Like, you know, it's like, where have you been, Lisa? Like, how was your meeting? Like he actually takes an interest. Like it's like the most like gratifying thing, and it warms my heart because he actually feels like this is a safe place for him, and he, you know, really we've seen his personality really shine, and he shares so much of himself that never happened before. And so to me that was really like where I again, being more in the day-to-day and being the one that was driving it, I was able to kind of change the way that we approached it. Like these people are just as valued as every other person on the team. And then seeing the shift in culture, and I'll preface that by saying I was fairly skeptical of what culture was. Like it was such an intangible thing. But over the last year and a half, after all of this kind of took root and the people that were, everyone that was working here really got behind it and really understood what it meant, is to see just how kind everyone was to everyone. It's been really inspiring, and it's been such an amazing journey to go on. And it speaks to the benefit of inclusion, because it is about recognizing abilities in everybody and everyone's value and everyone's like unique value of what they can offer. And sometimes it is in those intangible things. Like when Nico is here, like everyone's happy to, like, so happy to see him. It's like yay. And it's like, you know, in the last half an hour of his shift, he gets to change his music to Japanese 80s pop. And so we know that, you know, we're on the home stretch of Nico's workday when he's got the J-pop rocking in the kitchen. But it's all these unique things, and it's a really special experience to see how the value that it's created for the team, and it's started to attract people to the space. And not necessarily just because of the diverse abilities part, just inclusion across the board, as far as feeling like you're going to be welcome here for who you are, and you know, and it's a very safe space that way. And that's what I'm hearing from people that work here, is that's part of why they were attracted to come to Gabi and Jules, is because they know that they will be accepted for, again, who they are. And it's a pretty cool thing.
That's really cool. And you said it like, yeah, that's great. And there's a couple things that stood out for me in there too, is that, you know, that tokenism part. And you know, I think there is quite a few businesses that might engage in these things in a very surface way.
Yeah.
But you kind of realize that, you know, having that adaptable place that people feel that they can be themselves. It's a safe spot. So I guess my question on that is, as leaders, like what things did you have to maybe learn and adapt to along the way to really like, pave that way so then people could feel comfortable in being themselves?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a like organic process, right? Like, I mean, because initially for me, like as I said, when I got more hands-on and everything, it was taking a few steps back and like, engaging some of the job coaches that we worked with to come back into the space to really help improve the performance of everybody. It was a lot of conversations with the team around breaking down some of those barriers. Like I did find my philosophy when it comes to Juliana has always been to be very honest and upfront. And I feel like for me, that helps break down the barriers. It's like she's not the weird kid that's pacing back and forth. Like you can talk to me, you can ask me like, why did you do that? Like what's going on? Like if more people sometimes are afraid to ask. And I think that what we found is like people feeling like it's a safe space to say, I don't know how to deal with this person and what's happening and things like that. It not only has really helped to improve the outcomes as far as employment and employability of some of the folks. I think it's also like broken down a lot of barriers, which we talk about like with just general employment, because everybody needs certain things and certain clear communication. And, and I've said to managers many times, like, when you're feeling frustrated with maybe the outcomes with certain folks, like, it's a lot of times it is amplifying some of your weaknesses as a manager in general. And it's kind of like an opportunity to really challenge yourself. Like if they're not feeling like they understand, it's like, is your communication clear in general? Like, and that's what they found that to be, I think, a really positive way to challenge themselves to be better leaders, because they are, it is like, again, it's amplified a lot of the times because, it can be, there have been times where it's more of an extreme reaction to not clear and consistent communication. But it again, it's been a bit of a safe space to challenge themselves to be better. I don't know if I answered your question on that one.
No, I think that's great.
Yeah. No.
Even just listen to people talk about like those adaptable leadership practices, whether it's, recognizing each person is their own unique individual, and even coming together as a leadership team to figure out, what's missing, or, to exchange advice. Like it,
I think like when I like they talk about what have you learned, how do you change your workplace and some of the practices. Like, I mean, one of the barriers to employment a lot of times for people is the interview process, right? And the fact that doesn't really work. And since we have gone down this road, we've just completely changed the way that we don't even do interviews anymore. Like we do working interviews across the board for everybody, because it's like, it's just what we've seen is like that just works better for everyone, because it's like, some people interview better than others, and some people like are great interviews, and then you hire them and they show up and you're like, well, who are you? Like, you're not the person I interviewed. It's like sometimes people are not a great interview, and then they show up and you're like, oh my god, like, I'm glad that didn't stop me from hiring you, kind of thing, right? And so it's just the anxiety around all of it, and it's just like, show up and we'll show you what we're all about, and you can show us like a little bit what you're all about, and we'll see if it's a good match. And and that's been such a great best practice to adapt in our business across the board, that it's just it's another positive like outcome, I would say, and things that we've learned.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool to think of like some of the formal things that people rely on, and how exclusive, that's not the right, but exclusionary.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you mentioned before like case managers, and like as it relates to connecting with individuals that are neurodiverse or on the autism spectrum, like were there organization you specifically partnered with?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is especially if there's like employers listening to this. I think this is what one of my biggest pieces of advice is to find an agency that aligns with your business and will support you on this journey, because that has been instrumental. Like, we could not have been as successful as part is getting to 30% of our workforce without the support of great agencies. And I will say not all agencies are created equal, and that was a tough lesson for us to learn along the way, is really being very clear and upfront. Like it's funny, I have people that I meet with and they're like, well, you're just very like clear about what you want. I'm like, well, yeah, like I don't know why I wouldn't be. Like, I'm not gonna tiptoe around this. Like, this is what I need, and this is like what works for us. And like, if you are gonna be able to work within those parameters, great. Because for us, finding agencies that really take the time to understand our business, they will understand, okay, this is the position you're looking for. These are the qualities of the candidates that we need. And they're going to work really hard to find the right candidate, as opposed to where I've had in the past some situations where it's like, well, I just need to place this person. I don't care if they're going to be a good fit for you. Then like I can check them off and I can, you know, cash that check and then move on, which is unfortunately sometimes the approach. Whereas my number one agency that I work with in our community is Kinsight, and they have not only the values align with how they approach job coaching, they really try to be very comprehensive in their approach to supporting other clients, which I really appreciate. But the job coaches themselves are awesome people, and they really care about our business. They care about their clients, and then we're able to kind of all work together to get to a really positive outcome. And also sometimes through the negative ones, like, you know, we had one fairly long journey with somebody that we kept trying to support and kept trying to make it work, and kept trying to kind of push the boundaries on the system, because in this individual's case, they could do the job fine, like the nuts and bolts of the job, no problem. It was the soft skills and the interpersonal skills that were really problematic. And it's like, you can't talk to your coworkers that way. Like you can't talk to your boss that way. Like you can't interact us. And what we discovered, and this is kind of where I kind of go back to where I said at the beginning, the frustration that I have in seeing the gaps in the system, is it was really difficult to try to access resources that would address that gap. Like, and you know, this is you know, why I'm such a big supporter of Pacific Autism Family Network, is because they're working really hard in that space to try to identify those gaps and work on helping with those soft skills and the interpersonal skills, and because it can be, again, another part of autism that is a challenge, because it's just like, you know, when something that we work on every single day with Juliana, as far as like what's an appropriate way for you to interact and understand your impact on others, and it can be a challenge. And so going back to Kinsight, what I really respect about them is that they were invested like all in for like 3 years with this individual, and like there's no like, well, we have to phase out, like we're done. Like it's like, no, like they really were so invested, and that's been that's why they're my go-to. So if I have a position, I'm like, okay, I have this position. Do you guys have anybody? Because like, you're my preferred partner. Not to say there's not other agencies out there that do equally as good of a job, but for me, they've been kind of my go-to.
That's great. And like, you know, to the people in this audience that, you know, are in the place where they have to hire, like it sounds pretty nice to be able to just reach out to an organization and just be like, hey, you know, like this is the role. And,
oh gosh, I mean, especially from a small business perspective, like I don't have a training department. Like I don't have like anybody that can just take this on. So I really rely on the job coaches to be that trainer, essentially. Like they're the ones that are there to help bridge that, because I just don't have the resources. Like I couldn't do it without them. Like I know that we would not be successful. And so it is a critical component to our success. Not that every individual requires that ongoing support. Like you know, in the case of like our dishwasher, like he really never needed much more from, he was able to figure it out and go. There's a couple of moments that you know, we needed to kind of remind or bring in some help, and now I just connect directly to his mom, which is like another kind of interesting piece of the inclusion journey. Is like, you know, typically with you know, employing a lot of young people over the years, there's people that would, you know, show up with their parent to apply for the job. Like, you know, unless it's a 2-for-1 deal, I'm not really interested in talking to your parent. Like, but with some of these folks with diverse abilities, understanding and connecting with their parents has been tremendously helpful. Like I've got this one young man who we were really challenged, because like every 2 minutes he needed to be told he was doing a good job. And it's like, that's exhausting and really hard. And like, you know, then I ended up having a conversation with mom, and she's like, I know, it drives me crazy. And she's like, in school, the EAs every 2 minutes would tell him, good job, good job, good job. And she's like, can you stop it? Because this is not real world, right? And so for us to understand why he is that way certainly makes you a little bit more understanding and a little bit more patient. But it's like, it really, those pieces of the puzzle are really helpful. So it's shifted kind of the way that I do approach managing and kind of connecting with their parents at times. That it can be really helpful.
That's great. Like it, you know, I think all of us, you know, we kind of wish we had that team sometimes to be able to figure out, if we do have something that we want to work on someone with. And so the job developers themselves, like, I guess for the people that have never worked with one before, like, what would you say that relationship looks like, and the benefits, like, specifically?
Oh, I mean, it's great. Like, I mean, I've been lucky. I have worked with several agencies, and there's some great ones out there in addition to Kinsight. But I'll speak to my kind of journey with them in the sense that I just found that they took the time to come in, have conversations about what our business was all about, what we were looking for, what the tasks were going to be, and then when they bring the person in for the working interview, they're right there supporting them. And then again, through the whole training process, they're there. And our space is funnily enough ended up being totally perfect for the situation that looks great. So a lot of the job coaches can be up top, so not right in there, but kind of observing and being able to help troubleshoot any issues that we're having, but not actually like being in the person's face all the time, which is been really cool. But it can be things like, adapting tools. Like, so we have things like, we're there's scooping cookies, let's say, and we're like, okay, well, since you're really struggling with counting, like from 100 to 200, like, but creating visuals and these aids that they can put in front of them, then they can just kind of like, help us develop that. So again, it's just an amazing added value resource where, to have somebody that will develop those things. And sometimes it's doing like the social stories is a big one too, as far as like knowing what you should do when you come into work and how you say hi to people and all the things that should be done. And, and then with COVID, all the protocols that needed to be followed, like being able to talk through, and they'll call the folks before they come to work and just make sure to remind them of what do you need to do when you go to work, and how do you go through those steps. And so having that connection, if I run into things, I'm like, I'm not sure how to deal with this. Like, I can call them and be like, what do you think? Like, this is what I'm thinking I want to do. And it's just a phenomenal extra resource, honestly, that I can't emphasize enough for people, like especially small business owners. Like, this is the key. If this is something that you want to do, is really find an agency and hopefully find job coaches that you really click with, that really are supportive of your business, and it's a tremendous help.
It sounds a lot like they provide a bit of like free leadership training almost.
Oh, 100%. Oh yeah, it is like, it is that added like training department that we don't have.
Gino, sorry, you're going to ask something.
Yeah, no, I just I got a quick little question here for clarification. By job developers, do you mean the Work BC or more the Pacific Autism Family Network?
No, so it would be more, I get like Work BC is one of the agencies that are out there, and they're obviously quite spread out throughout the community, because those are more directly funded through the government. But there's also other agencies out there. So you see, and it like Canucks Autism Network. They do. Who's the other one? Ready, Willing, and Able is another one, and there's tons. Like, so and this is like Kinsight is another provider. But there's so many, and it's an interesting part. Like, if I go back to like a president's group hat, as far as looking at the way that the system is set up, I would have to say that's maybe one of the weaknesses of the system, is because there's so many different agencies out there. It's very convoluted, and it can be very intimidating when you are trying to figure out where do you take those first steps. And I think that there's some more work that can be done in that space to kind of make it easier for employers to figure out who you connect with.
Really? So then it's just reaching out, building that relationship, and then seeing who you resonate with. That really, it sounds like, really takes the time to understand who would be, what skills are required so this person could be successful in that role.
Yeah,
I can imagine it would be really tough to be in a place if you didn't develop that relationship, and you might have to end that relationship based on maybe a fit that wasn't there for both parties.
Yeah, it could be very frustrating. I've had a couple of situations like that where it was like, this isn't working out, and it was through no fault of the individual. Unfortunately, it was really the agency and the lack of the quality of job coaching, I would say, that really was ultimately the reason why we couldn't continue, which is very frustrating, because I'm looking at it again, I started looking at it through a parent's lens. It's like, if that was my kid that was not being properly supported, I would kind of want to know that, but it's like this awkward kind of position to be in. But again, this is where, for us, I just try to be a bit more choosy about what agencies I work with, and then also, again, be really upfront about what I'm looking for and how we manage our bakery operations.
So you mentioned, so say, someone's going on this journey, they've built that relationship with the job developer that they feel has a good understanding of the role. And, as it relates, I know you mentioned like the recruitment process, you got rid of the interviewing and you have that more that job oriented where it's the application of the skills.
Mhm.
So I guess like kind of build the question one is, how do you support that person that, you did mention that understanding and less ambiguity, like how would you support them in like scheduling the interview, or even if you made that hire, like onboarding, just to set that individual up to success.
I mean, it's different with every person, I would say, a little bit based on the job that they're going to do, right? And so, and it's interesting because our approach is changing a little bit. Like when pre-COVID, we were doing a lot of job cards for folks. So okay, we need somebody that's cookies, scale out dough. We would have 5 tasks that role would do, and we had fairly good success with that. But what we were finding through our operations have changed quite a bit in the last 10, 11 months. And so we were finding that generalists were a little bit more helpful. So that continues to evolve. To kind of go back to your question, it's not an easy answer on that one because it does depend on the individual. It depends on their understanding and their ability to kind of how they learn, right? And so, we've had some folks that the job coaches did a lot of front loading and work outside of the bakery before they would even come in, as far as like teaching them certain things and reviewing certain tasks. We definitely, because we got into quite a good rhythm with the Kinsight coaches, they really kind of got to know the roles themselves, so they could honestly, they took on a lot of the training in some cases because they already knew it. They'd worked through it with other clients, and so they just could kind of pass it on to the next client. I don't know if that really answered your question though, Taylor. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it does. Like in the fact that, that's a great point. It's just that, it's, I guess you can't boiler template everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Having an understanding of their specific needs. But I really like how you highlighted that if you do connect with a job coach, they can take on a lot of that training for you. And so that you have that individual that, has, not only do they have your training, but they have its specialized training specific from the job coach.
Yeah, that's great.
So I guess my other question then too is, say, you brought this individual in the team, like what sorts of things are you doing with your existing team to really kind of set in place, an environment of inclusion? Like what things are you doing?
Well, I think that again, this kind of goes back to like, as I explained, where how we got to where we are. And I think that now it's so embedded in the space, like everyone knows that this is what we're all about. And so people are so welcoming and just so encouraging, that there's not a lot of work that I have to do on that, like to really it's like we try to, if there's any circumstances, like for example, we had a young man that worked here that we had to, he was very sensitive to personal space. Like you had to really work on not getting into a space. Over the years, he really got calmer in the space, and he wouldn't because he used to really, if there was any loud noises, he would really startle. I have another man who's really sensitive to whistling. Like he can't handle it. Like it's just and so we try to really work on the team to, if there's any things like that are triggers, that are things that we need to make sure people know about them, then we'll kind of front load that situation. And then when people are joining the team, just be like, hey, this is some of the quirks, this is some things you need to know about so-and-so, that kind of thing, just to kind of help. But I think that also is kind of has helped to kind of break down those barriers, because I feel like they can ask, and they can, because what we had seen, again going back to this, the tokenism, or what's not true inclusion, we had one individual that really was we had to work with a lot, but the reaction from coworkers was, well, I'm just not going to deal with him because I don't know how to deal with him. And I'm like, well, so I appreciate why you're having that reaction, but that's actually the opposite of what we're trying to do, because that's not true inclusion, right? Is being able to break down those barriers and find ways to communicate and to work together. And so it is a kind of a constant process, I would say. Really, it's just kind of like, as things come up, we learn from them and we try to do a better job communicating with everybody. But I do feel like right now we're kind of in this great space where everybody is really so supportive of what we're doing, and they really so value the members of our team that kind of bring that added joy and kindness up to what we're doing, that they are kind of welcome people with open arms and they're really receptive to it.
It's really cool. And like one thing that really stood out to me that you said there is, sometimes having to remind people, just to maybe be more curious or inquisitive rather than be like, I'm done. Like,
absolutely. I mean, but again, like I would say like on that same track, like, and I hear this a lot from employers that are afraid or tentative about starting this, is like, what if it doesn't work out? And we've had like many times where it didn't work out, and sometimes it didn't work out really quickly, and then there's other times where it's like I got to the point where it's like I invested so much time and energy trying to make it work to the point that I'm like, I'm doing the disservice at this point, because this isn't realistic. Like another employer would never jump through all of these hoops to try to make things successful. So it's trying to get that balance where you have that investment where you feel like, okay, I've invested so much time, like I really want it to work, but it's like in that point where it's like, okay, this is just not the right fit, this is maybe the right time, whatever it is, and being okay with that. And again, that can be tough, and like it can feel like a failure, but like ultimately not all people are going to be the right fit for the space across the board. So it's like you kind of have to accept that's going to, of course, be no different with people with diverse abilities.
Right. And so I recognize there's questions coming in here. I do have a few more for you, but everyone that's asked a question, promise we're going to do our best to get to them. But I'm really digging into that is, kind of on that, if someone in this room today or, someone not is, if someone were to say, be like, this is going to be too much work for me as a leader, I'm already busy. Like what argument would you pose to them in response to that?
I mean, there's a few things I would say. I mean, I totally get that. Especially now. I think there's a single small business owner or business owner, anything that would say it's an easy time. So I really fear when I go kind of to a broader, like where I hope our society is moving, I fear that COVID is going to have such it's going to pose such a huge challenge because there's so many businesses that are just trying to survive right now. So I totally understand that, especially in the service sector, especially in hospitality. It's a challenge. I think that, where if I would be answering this question 12 months ago, I would say like, you're going to find a dedicated, loyal employee, like, and that's a huge part of it. And that hasn't changed necessarily. But like, certainly the labor force was different 12 months ago than it is now. And I think, we were talking about this just before we started this call, about the fact that, there's a lot of really amazing people looking for work right now, which is, so when you post for a job now, you get like, tons of qualified applicants, whereas before maybe if you were lucky, you got one. And so things have shifted that way, but the value that you get, again, the loyalty, and the commitment to the job, like, I mean, it's crazy. Like it's something that I had never seen before. Like, I mean, again, going back to like our dishwasher, like they are, 45 minutes early to work every single day. They are never really missed a day unless they're sick. And that is something that for a dishwasher, and he's been with us for 4 years now, like you don't see that. Like that's not something that happens. That's not a job that people are like, and he shows up with joy. He shows up and does that job. I mean, so that's a huge plus as far as why to do it. I mean, the long-term benefits to your company are huge. I mean, like I can't speak enough about how blessed I feel to be able to come to work every day into this space with such amazing people that we have kind of cultivated here, in the sense that people have been attracted and want to stay here and want to be here because it is such a kind place. I mean, again, not to say that we don't have our moments and there's challenges, because there absolutely is, of course. But on the whole, everyone is just really does lead with kindness and understanding of one another, and it's pretty phenomenal, like, to be a part of it.
That is amazingly put. Like, yeah, and the business case is, we have a human case, we have a business case, and what's right. And, it's really great to hear that. So, I think, kind of based on that, maybe it's a good way to segue into maybe some of the questions the audience has, and give time for that.
Yeah, so just on that topic, one of the questions here is, what is the average tenure of team members? I know you just said that you had a pretty good long-standing one, but talking about turnover and how much the bakery was experiencing.
Yeah, I would say our the blip of COVID aside, I would say that we're definitely we fare way better than I think what the industry average would be. I mean, again, to say a dishwasher that's been with us for 4 years, are on average, I've got people that have been here for 2.5 to 3 years, it's a bit of our operation is a little bit split. We've got our back of house baking team, and then we have our front of house team. That's the demographics skew a little bit younger for the folks that serve customers and things like that. But even there, I mean, we have people that they may leave to go to school and then they'll come back and work in the summer. There's a lot of that. So we have, this also spreads out to Divano as well. Like even the cafes, I've got people that have worked for us for 3 to 5+ years. And for Caffe, that's pretty solid. Like I'd say like the number of people that are with us for less than a year is very minimal.
I think that's great. I think that's long for any industry. I mean,
yeah.
And I'd like to point out that beeping in the back is because Lisa has just kind of snuck away. She's still in the bakery. Just a testament to what a hard worker you are. The next question here is in relation to COVID, have you ever considered hiring someone with the financial support of the wage subsidy right now? And I assume that's what the question's asking. And as well for food safe and other training, is that something that your business pays for the employees, or something that the employees are needed to fund on their own?
Yeah, so okay, two points there. I think that the subsidy question is a really good one. And I think that, again, wearing a different hat, like at the Prisons Group table, talking to government and stuff like that, I really feel strongly that subsidies are going to have to be part of the conversation, unfortunately, and not, unfortunately or like whatever, however you want to look at it. It's something that we didn't really do before. I never explored subsidies for anybody that we hired. Now I would look at it more because, and it's something that I'm looking at. I was just telling Taylor about this program that's being offered now. That's kind of like a work experience program through Canucks Autism Network, where they pay the work experience for 160 hours is completely paid for. All of the training that's required, as far as like if it was a food safe situation, they would take care of it. Any uniform that's required, they take care of that. And then there's they will cover the cost for us of any training that's required, which is a pretty amazing program that's kind of happening right now. So subsidies, I think, are going to need to play more of a part, and that's kind of like where we're looking at, because at the place that I'm at right now, I don't necessarily need to hire too many more people, but I will look at it more so if it is a subsidy situation. Food safe brings up another really interesting point, because I've had multiple conversations with different organizations about the fact this is a massive gap, that there's not an adapted food safe available yet, which is so ridiculous. Like you can take food safe in almost every language that is out there, but you can't, it's not adapted for folks on the spectrum. And so it's kind of left to the individual like health inspector who's putting on the course. So like in a general sense, to answer the question about food safe, we actually do offer it for all of our employees. We had pre-COVID, every 6 months we would offer food safe here at the bakery, and a former employee of ours is actually a health inspector now, so she comes back and does the program for us, which is awesome. But I was talking to her too, and the fact that like, yeah, it's a huge gap, and that it's not, there's no adapted, or Douglas College does something, but it's through their program. So I'm hoping that we can advocate for more with some more attention to be paid to that, and the fact that that is a gap, especially considering that the service industry and the food service industry is going to be something that is going to be, for a lot of people, that's the direction that they will go. So it should be available more readily.
Absolutely. Thank you. One of the questions here is when bringing an individual who is on the spectrum to work, how do you prepare the team, the already existing team?
Yeah, so kind of like I mentioned, I think that we talk to the job coach as well. Like they're really part of that process with us to try to say like, you know, and I talk to the individual themselves just to say like, you know, are you comfortable, like, you know, us sharing any sort of like anything you want the team to know about you prior to you coming in? Like, is there certain things that are going to really help in your success? So that again, we kind of help with that transparency and that it's like the team welcoming people in, but kind of doing it with your eyes open as far as what's going to really make them feel at home, or again, if going back to if there are any triggers or issues that we can be upfront and have those conversations. You know, again, like given the fact that we are where we're at kind of in this journey, everyone knows that this is a big part of what we do. And so they are very welcoming. So I don't really have to kind of like say, okay, guys, like this is what's happening. Like I certainly do talk to the managers, and I you know, our bakery manager, her and I have chatted quite a bit. I said, you know, I want to get this back kind of rolling in the new year. And so she's like completely on board with that and making sure that, you know, and I'm very much honest with her and create a space where she can come to me with challenges and be really honest with me about challenges that she's having in a way that she's like, I'm not sure how to deal with this. What would you do? And I can help her through that. And then, you know, we identified, you know, where some of the challenging parts were previously. And so moving into this new year, as far as how we want to bring people back on board, we're really kind of having those open conversations about what's going to make it successful for the entire team. So I think that just comes down to that, just being really honest and upfront. And that's kind of proven to be the most important piece of the puzzle, really.
Great, thank you. Thank you. That's all the questions that we have here from the audience. There's a quick other minute if anybody wants to get in. Taylor, do you have any more questions for Lisa?
Well, I guess, yeah, like, you know, I think just to kind of sum it up, for someone that is leaving today's session is inspired to kind of embark on this journey on how they can effectively create an inclusive workplace and connect with individuals with neurodiversity or on the autism spectrum. What key advice would you give them that they could go away right now and just start that journey?
Well, I think it's having the intention is a big one, right? It's like committing to it and being like, you know, really saying like, we're going to do this, we're going to figure it out. Talking to your team about your existing team about that you want to undergo this journey and like, you know, and really make these positive changes, I think, which are ultimately really positive changes to your team. Reach out. I mean, I always like offer like anyone is welcome to like reach out to me, ask questions. Like I'm so happy to, I've sat down again pre-COVID, sat down with people and talked to people, happy to connect over the phone and really share more tangible thoughts of, and, you know, point people in the right direction. The President's Group, accessibleemployers.ca, there's tons of resources on that site. I definitely recommend checking that out because it breaks it down as far as like, you know, how to take the first steps, interviewing, adapting your workplace, all the things. There's a lot of manuals and handbooks that are being developed that are out there, so I can also point people in the right direction. And maybe we can, after this, I can Taylor, I can share with you some of those, and we can maybe put that on shift change as far as like being able to access those, because there's lots of resources out there. So and I think it's just like, yeah, intention is a big piece of it though, right? Because I think that for us was what the reason we were so committed to it, because we made that part of what we wanted to do and who we wanted to be. And so that commitment didn't waver despite a lot of the challenges. And again, I recognize the fact that I'm personally invested in the journey, given Juliana, and like, you know, we live it every day. So it gives us a specific set of skills that allow us to undergo this journey at times when it is challenging and frustrating. I do have a lot of patience, again, because that Juliana requires a lot of patience. And so I think that, and hopefully being able to learn all the things that we have and continue on this journey, that hopefully I'm able to help other employers do the same, and always willing to and happy to share.
That's great. You know, I really appreciate you know, being so open and honest on this journey. And like personally, I've taken away quite a bit, you know, from that, you know, environment it creates, that everyone's adaptable to each other. You know, people are willing to, you know, like maybe look at things in a different way rather than just writing each other off. Yeah. And it's really cool to hear that there's job coaches available that, you know, it's like that leadership training that I imagine translates to everyone else on the team, and even taking some of the training for you. And And then there's wage subsidies available too for, that shouldn't be the intent, but it does help, especially right now during a
I think
pandemic.
it is now it's a big help as far as that intimidating factor, as far as it's going to cost money, or it can alleviate that, especially if you're not sure if it's going to be successful. I think it is going to help in that first step. But
That's great. Well, yeah, thank you so much. I think that's all the questions I have. And
If people want to contact you, Lisa, how do they do that?
yeah, they can. People can email me, lisa@gabiandjules.com. If you go to Gabi and Jules, if you go to the website too, and you go through the online contact me kind of thing, or contact us, that comes to me. So happy to connect with people that way.
I'm going to pop that in the chat here
Yeah,
for everyone.
absolutely. Yeah.
And Gabi and Jules is open. Caffe Divano is open. People could come
Yeah.
visit in Port Moody.
Yeah, please come out. Yeah, they're online for Gabi and Jules. Everything we deliver throughout Metro Vancouver too.
Thank you, and thank you so much. We know you're very busy, and thank you for taking the time to do this. It means the world to us. It's great to have you on. It was, I just want to make sure I get this right. PacificAutismFamily.com is who we're donating to today. Take a visit there or check them out on our website. You can also find out more about Lisa on our website with a little bit of a bio there. Thank you so much for coming. Next month, February 9th. Is that right, Taylor?
Yeah, the Tuesday, February.
We have our final session for diversity and inclusion with a good friend of ours, actually making a second appearance in Shift Change. Heat La Liberté, the owner of One Arrow Meats, will be on with us, and he will be talking about the LGBTQ plus experience for back of house and kitchen roles. This was really wonderful. Lisa, you've been great.
Oh,
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.